one of the most interactive sessions of the fair, an exclusive webinar featuring one of the most well-known names in the banking world, Citibank. Today's webinar seeks to tackle an issue that Citi as an organization champions at their workplace: diversity and inclusion. Enough talk, time for action. And we do have a very diverse and inclusive panel today. They are Sangeeta Bishop, Director, Trade and Transaction Services; Raymond Lim, Director, Citi Commercial Bank; Christian Chia, Senior Vice President, Cards and Unsecured Lending; Nuri Lim, Vice President, ICRM AML; and Satvir Bhatt, who will be actually moderating the session. She is the Vice President of HR at the bank. So before I pass the virtual floor to our moderator, I'd like to urge all our viewers to send in your comments and questions in the chat box to stand a chance for our speakers to have them answer it live here, only on Graduan Aspire. Team Graduan will also be giving away Shopee vouchers to the 5 selected questions or comments from the chat box. You can keep up to date with the latest happenings in the Graduan universe by following us on social media at Graduan. And don't forget to vote for Citibank as Malaysia's most preferred employer at the Graduan Brand Awards. So without further ado, I'll be passing the floor to our moderator. Satvir, it's all yours.
Thank you, Wafi. Hello, selamat pagi, good morning all. Hope you're doing well on this lovely Monday morning. My name is Satvir Bhatt, as Wafi had introduced. I'm a HR advisor with Citi Malaysia. Firstly, I would like to thank the Graduan team for giving us this opportunity for the second time to get virtually connected with all of you. Last year, we spoke to you about navigating your career through a pandemic. And this year, we are back with Enough Talk, Time for Action, where we would speak about diversity and inclusion and how it applies to all of us. Before we get into the action proper, I have with me some very successful established colleagues with Citi who've had a very unique career trajectory with Citi, and I would like for them to introduce themselves to you and to also give some insights about their experience with Citi. Hi, Raymond. Hi, Sangeeta, Nuri, Christian. Hello. I'll probably start with Raymond because you appear the first on my my screen. Raymond, yes, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Xavier, and very good morning to everyone who's watching this webinar. So I'm Raymond Lim. I run the commercial bank business in Citi, and what we do is we serve the needs of both SME and also larger companies within Malaysia. I've been with Citi coming to 14 years, and I've been working in 3 countries. So starting in Singapore, Vietnam, and now in Malaysia for the last couple of years. Really enjoy all my time working in Citi and working with all the diverse talent that we bring in. And I've learned so much in these 13 years. So Xavier, that's my brief introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you so much. Sangeeta, if we could hear from you, please.
Thank you so much. Morning, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK, so I'm not having such a good day thanks to the match last night, but hey, we won't talk about that. So I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Sangeeta Bishop. I've been with Citi for 22 years. I currently run the onboarding team in TTS, in our transaction services business. A lot of what Raymond does comes to us to get onboarded, so the medium to large clients. I've worked across 4 continents. I've been really lucky in Citi to be able to work in North and South America, in a lot in Asia, in quite a few countries in Asia, and obviously my home region, which is EMEA. Yeah, I think that's it, right? Thank you.
Short and sweet. Thank you. Nuri, over to you.
Thanks, Adver. Good morning, everyone. I'm very, very excited to be here. So my name is Nuri Lim, and I'm the People Strategy and Communications Lead at Citi ICRM. So what that means essentially is I'm responsible for building a strategic framework to ensure all compliance staff are effective in bringing regulatory mandates to Asia Pacific. So I've been at Citi for 8 years now, starting with a career in legal, and then joined the Financial Intelligence Unit, and then now I'm actually in the Chief Administration Office. So I'm most proud of my role in co-chairing the Generations Network, which is aimed at promoting inclusivity and embracing generational diversity at our workplace. So my dream is actually to be an inspirational leader who creates an engaging path for young adults to be the best version of themselves.
Thank you, Nuri. That's, I'm sure, very applicable to a lot of our audience today. Thank you so much. Christian, last but not the least, over to you.
Thank you, Xavier. Nuri, I'm definitely inspired by you. So my name is Christian. I've been with the bank for almost 12 years now. Started out as a management associate. So this is my first job, and still it's my passion being here at Citi. My current role is within the cards and unsecured lending business. I'm responsible for acquiring new customers for credit cards and personal loans. I've had the opportunity to work in a couple of product roles, and most recently in the sales role right now, leading the sales organization. And also I had one privilege to go to New York to work there for 6 months. So one of the many privileges of working in Citi. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm sure the audience, when they've heard my fellow colleagues and friends at Citi introduce themselves, you would actually have by now realized that we all come from very diverse backgrounds. From somebody who's in legal, running, you know, people strategy, innovations and activities, and Sangeeta, who comes and who's, you know, worked in 4 different continents. And I'm sure that we would have a lot of insights to share with the audience today. Now, just going back to the topic of the day, which is enough talk, time for action. And we started off by saying that we are going to be speaking a little bit about diversity and inclusion. I'm sure this is close to our hearts for most of us, if not all. So if I may just ask each of you to share what does DNI or diversity and inclusion mean to, you know, each of you. If I may start with you, Christian.
Okay, so since we're on the topic of football and we just ended the Euros, I'm going to speak about diversity in that context, right? So think of it this way. You know, in football, there are multiple positions, right? You have 11 players, you have 10 outfield, 1 is a goalie. But for each role that the outfield player has, and there are 3 mainly, right? Typically, you have the defenders, you have the midfielders, and you have the strikers. Each one of them brings a specific, you know, role and strategy to the team and to the game. And with the specific skill set that they play, that's basically what diversity is in football, right? If you don't have, and you have everyone who's a striker, no one's going to defend. And likewise, if you have too much of it, everyone's a defender, no one's going to strike, and no one's going to score for that. And in terms of inclusion really means how each player gets involved in a certain play, whether it's scoring a goal, stringing together multiple passes as a team. So I think in the context of Barcelona, they will say tiki-taka, or perhaps tackling the ball to defend against the opponents. Each of this, how you get involved in that is really inclusion. I'll add just one more to that, right? Equity. I think equity is also important in the conversation between diversity and inclusion. Equity is really about giving each player the recognition they deserve for what they've contributed, to think of it that way. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Christian. I think that was a very short, sweet information about or education about football. So for those of us who are not familiar with it, now you know how the whole game works. And again, for the England fans, do not be disappointed. Hopefully there's another time. But anyway, I just had to slide that in. Raymond, we could hear from you. What does DNI mean to you?
Thanks, Xavier. I think on a more personal note, you know, this DNI, diversity and inclusion, really applies to my daughters when they grow up. You know, when they start working, you know, in whatever industry they choose to work in, or even if they start their own business. I really hope that the environment will really encourage strong diversity and, you know, inclusion, and with no bias against, you know, not just, you know, females, but, you know, even minority races moving into senior positions. So that's really my hope for the future, and a lot of things that we're doing today, you know, will pan out, you know, in the next decade or so, because it's a long-term journey for this whole DNI thing. So Xavier, that's my short and sweet answer to what it means to me.
That's very close to my heart, I must say, Raymond. I'm a mother of two young daughters as well, so I totally agree with you. I think, like what you had said, I think the world is shaping up well. Yes, there's a lot more to do, and I'm sure we'll be speaking about that today a lot more. But yeah, that's really
Thank you.
a dream of mine too. So we share a common dream. Sangeeta, if we may hear from you, please.
Great, thank you. And I think, when I think of diversity and inclusion, right, there's so many different lenses you can look at. A simple example is, I trained as an engineer. I studied engineering at university, and if I looked at the people that got hired in the same graduate batch as myself, we had people from the arts, we had people who did history, we had econ. We had a couple of lawyers. We even had a medical person who decided midstream that he didn't want to do medicine anymore. So, I think diversity is about sort of, when you look at our customer base, they're all types of people, all types of abilities and disabilities as well. So, we sort of try and hire people in the organization that are similar to what our customer base looks like, so we can think like a customer thinks. Because if we all hire the same type of people, we won't be able to service our client base. And by that, when I briefly talked about disability, I know in quite a few locations in the UK, in South Africa, etc., we hire people who are disabled and actually even in Malaysia we have some disabled staff, and we just need to basically make sure that our systems and the way we actually sort out our infrastructure, it works to be able to cater for them. And then having those kind of people in our team makes us also think about, is it going to work for them? So when we decide to do, I don't know, we do a recruitment drive, or we decide to do a party in the office, we sort of are always looking and saying, okay, is that going to work for everyone? Is it inclusive? Does it, or is it just going to work for X amount of people? And I think that's what it is. It's about you recruit. I'm also the co-chair. I forgot to mention it earlier. I'm the co-chair for the Women's Network in City. So, gender diversity is kind of, yes, we're doing it really well. We recognize it, but it's also about recognizing the other types of diversity in the organization and in the world. So I hope that sort of brings a different perspective for you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sangeeta. I think, yes, you're right. It's a very powerful word. I think used right, it benefits a lot of us, and it can make a huge difference. Thank you. Nuri, hear from you, please.
All right. Thanks, Sadhvir. So I think we've heard a lot from our other panelists. But what diversity and inclusion means to me is actually very similar in music, where many different notes blend together, making a perfect chord. So coming from a Kebangsaan school in Sabah, I have friends from multiple ethnicities, right? And I've always considered us like flowers of one garden. So though different in kind, color, shape, we are all refreshed by water. We are revived by the wind. We are invigorated by the rays of sun, right? And this diversity adds to the charm, to the beauty as well. So, and I think most of our graduates on this call today are all Gen Zs, right? If I'm not mistaken. So for all of you ARMY fans, I'm not sure if you know, so BTS released a single over the weekend. It's called Permission to Dance. And I tell you, it blew my mind because the video, it had people from multiple, diverse cultures, right? It was just so amazing and impactful. And you see everyone coming together, right? So that doesn't, it doesn't happen all the time. And it was just such a feel-good, catchy song where you just want to dance to it. So like what my fellow colleagues were mentioning. So it really doesn't matter like what background you're from. Diversity and inclusion enriches all of us, similar to what like BTS is trying to relay to us.
Okay, thank you, Nuri. I didn't know you were a K-pop fan too. Well, I'm not. My daughter is, so I'm going to connect her to you. Yeah. Blackpink, BTS, all getting educated now. Nice. Yes, I mean, I relate to that as well from a Kebangsaan school. I think, like they always say, Malaysia is a melting pot of different cultures, different backgrounds, and it's fantastic. I think we are like world leader when it comes to diversity and, inclusion, especially when it starts from school. Fantastic, nice. So it was nice to hear from all of you, and I'm sure the audience today have got a bit of an insight about what we're going to be speaking about. I'm sure there'll be a lot more. As Mahatma Gandhi said, our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. Maya Angelou, a famous American poet and rights activist, said, "It's time for our parents to teach young people early on that in diversity there is beauty and there is strength." On that note, Christian, if I may ask you, what is your view of the current approach of diversity and inclusion across the world?
Thank you, Xavier. So I'm going to talk a little bit about in the context of Citi and what we've done. I think that's important as well. So first of all, in the context of Citi, whose ability is to combine global insights with deep local knowledge of individuals, given the network that we have across the globe, we can create collaborative teams and drive inclusiveness. Diversity really is a way to enable engine of new ideas, right? Through the diverse group of people, it allows us to analyze problems differently. We can arrive at different solutions, which in turn really increases the chances of a positive outcome. So let me talk a little bit about Citi and what we've done there, right? Diversity is not just about the privileges of wealth, education, or job opportunities. It's fundamental human rights and civil rights and the dignity and respect that comes with them. So I want to say that, Citi is taking this very seriously. We've created at least 10 diversity groups or affinity groups. Just to name a few: Asian heritage, Black heritage, Citi women, disability, like what Sangeeta touched upon, generations, pride, parents, multicultural. And we're so serious about them that they're each co-led by a certain senior leadership member at a global level. And that's top down, right? But why is this important? Well, it's a key part of who we are and how we thrive, right? We're responsible for creating an environment where everyone can be themselves and our diverse perspectives can really help accomplish that. So I'm going to talk in the context of three. So for each of our employees in the Citi, why is this important? Because the culture of inclusion means we're all comfortable to contribute and be ourselves at work. Be ourselves at work. That's important, right? If we're not ourselves, how are we going to be able to carry that forward for our constituents? So let's talk about our constituents, for clients and communities. Right, it's important that by embracing a variety of views, we can drive innovation and reinforce ethical business practices. And largely for Citi, as the world's global bank, we have unique strengths of backgrounds and perspective from. I'm going to name 2 or 3 key initiatives that we've done. For starters, I think Citi is the first major bank on Wall Street to appoint a woman as a CEO, right? And that's Jane Fraser. That really broke the banking's highest glass ceiling, right? And Jane Fraser is an outstanding leader who's shown that she's a visionary, she's compassionate, empathetic, and most importantly, she's bold, right? The other thing about this is, on the back of what happened because of the George Floyd incident in Minnesota, Citi's commitment to racial equity. We've put in a commitment of more than $1 billion in strategic initiatives that can help close that racial wealth gap and increase economic mobility in the US, right? Things like promoting Black home ownership, increasing access to banking and credit in communities of color, investing in Black entrepreneurs, strengthening Citi's policies and practices in order to become an anti-racist institution. That's just one aspect of it. The other thing that really is close to my heart, and because I'm from the cards business, right, and I did work in New York, Citi most recently launched what we call a True Name initiative. It's a collaboration with MasterCard. What it does is it allows customers to use their self-identified first name to be printed on their credit cards, which then in turn allows them to be serviced by their chosen name during calls into customer services or across their digital touch points. So who are the real people who benefit, right? People who are transgender or non-binary customers, they will feel recognized, accepted, and empowered, which is actually one of the pain points they've always had in the past. Last but not least, right? We have done a lot in addressing youth and unemployment from underserved communities. And we call this creating pathways to progress, which really aims to build job skills and equip young people with skills and networks that they need to succeed in today's rapidly changing economy. We've pledged more than 100 million US dollars over 3 years to provide economic opportunities for such young people across the world who are underserved, right? And we hope to provide 10,000 young adults with opportunities to gain work experience in the city. And another 10,000 of our own colleagues globally will be volunteering in this program to mentor and coach them. So, I mean, that's how committed we are to the topics of diversity. So thanks, Abir.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you so much for a great insight. I think in terms of the different work that has gone in, the initiatives, I in particular like the MasterCard initiative that the cards business has done, which is, because I've always had that struggle with people either wrongly pronouncing my name or, using my dad's name to address me, because that's how, the name is appearing. So I think that's fantastic personally for me. Thank you so much. Raymond, on that similar thought, perhaps, I think the other important aspect of diversity inclusion that's very widely spoken about is the different generations, or the generational the vast generations, or the different generations that are in the workforce today. So just to ask you this, do you think that having people with more similarities is much easier to manage, which means that we will probably be able to reduce the generational gap? What's your view on this?
Yeah, so let me just start by just talking a bit about this generation gap thing that has come about. So I think to Nuri's point about following BTS and Blackpink, and even things like TikTok and all the developments on these social media, the young generation, the Gen Zs, they do have a lot of access, and the kind of dreams they have for their life is very different from some of us that grew up 30-40 years ago, right? So how do you achieve success? There are many different ways now. You can be a TikTok star, you can be a YouTuber. The conventional thinking of I want to be a professional and all that has gone away in many countries where people can excel. But how does that kind of link the workforce? So to your question, obviously an easy thing to do is to get everybody who's of the same age group, the same gender, because it's just sometimes in our nature that we want to be in our comfort zone. But as an organization like Citi, where we are a high performance organization, that doesn't work. I think some of my colleagues have mentioned about working with different people from different backgrounds, being able to draw on different experiences. And this is no different from working with people across different generations, right? So, if you take someone who's starting work now and you take someone who's been in a bank 25 years, having multiple generations in the team is actually more beneficial for the organization, because one, the younger colleagues that come in can obviously draw the institutional experience from the older ones in terms of how to do the jobs. But at the same time, there's this concept of reverse mentoring, which we've already implemented, whereby the younger colleagues actually teach the more experienced, I won't use the word older, I think that's a bit sense, the more experienced colleagues on new technologies, ways of doing things, how to make things more efficient, and to dispel this thing that we've done it the last 20 years this way, so we should continue doing it this way, or don't fix what's not broken. So this type of interaction between younger people coming to the workforce who are have grown up on a lot of these social media, they've grown up on tech, they find ways of doing things faster, they look at things differently. This is also a very very strong learning for even those who have been in industry for a long time, and saying, oh look, we can do things another way. And in fact, in commercial bank in the region, we've deliberately started a reverse mentoring exercise, whereby you would have a junior person who maybe would have 3-4 years experience working, and they would be paired up with a senior person who maybe would have like 20 odd years, seniors. And it's a bit of a strange dynamic, because typically it's the other way around, where the senior person would mentor the younger one. But we've deliberately done this because we want to realize that in this whole D&I initiative, everyone has something to contribute regardless of age. Like coming back to soccer, right? There was a famous coach that said, if you're good enough, you're good enough, right? So you get people who are 18 or 19 who are fielded with the England team, and of course with other teams as well, because they bring something different to the team. And it's not just about, the experience that an older player brings. And with this pairing up of, a junior and senior where they catch up on a regular basis, it actually provides a lot of interaction and really interesting outcomes that the older and the more experienced staff can experience. So I would say that we need different generations in a team in order for the organization to thrive. So that's my view on it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Raymond. I think one of the other very explicit example is across the room today. I think we are all, like you said, some that have, without using the word older, some that are a lot more experienced, some that are, moderately experienced, some are probably starting on in terms of experience, but I think we're very diverse ourselves. And yeah, and Raymond, BTS, it seems to be Blackpink, seems to be a common interest amongst us. Huh? Great. That's really nice. So we've spoken about some insights that Christian had shared in terms of diversity and inclusion and the type of work that's been, City has been embarking on. And Raymond, thank you so much for giving us a good perspective of the value the different generations bring. And I think the key word to take away is reverse mentoring, where you probably have somebody who's, starting off in the working world, and to be able to mentor a senior person. It's nice to know that the team or the business that you are with has already started and embarks on that. So that's fantastic. Just on that thought, Sangeeta, if I may, come to you. I think the buzzword of late is unconscious bias, which is very commonly used in a lot of interactions. So you being a senior member of Citi, and I'm sure in your career trajectory with Citi, you've made multiple hiring decisions. So how do you relate to the word unconscious bias when you make these decisions?
Okay, that's a great question, actually. So everyone, the irony of unconscious bias is that everyone thinks that they don't have it, right? Everyone thinks, well, I don't have any biases. I will just hire the best person, but your idea of who the best person is very much based on what you value and what you don't value. So for example, really simplistically, I'm quite an analytical person. So when I go to hire people, I'm generally asking questions that relate to, are you going to answer it in a artsy way, or are you going to answer it in an analytical way? And when they answer it in a very artsy way, my general view is that, oh, I don't think that this is, a good fit. So there comes my unconscious bias. But the reality is, if I have a team of 50 people and all of them are just analytical, and everyone uses brain and not heart, then I end up with a very skewed view of what the world is. All our decisions are always made in the same way. We all agree with it, because guess what? We all think, yeah, you should absolutely look at the data and make your choice based on that. But not everything is data driven, right? Despite what people would say, despite what Google would make you believe, not everything is data driven. So that's a very simple way, and that's a very personal way that I think, unconscious bias really, works out, or in my case. Now, the good news is that I know that I'm biased towards someone being quite analytical. So when I do make decisions, I will usually try and get someone on the panel with me who perhaps is not the same as me, right? And is able to, is kind of, maybe most of the time I try and get a diametrically opposite person, but a person who's actually very competent working with me to make sure that I'm actually, almost, counteracting that bias that I might have, and the reality is the reason why I know this about myself is, like most things, I took a quiz. So we had a quiz that was put out that says, are you biased? And of course, all of us went in saying, absolutely not. I'm totally unbiased. And took the quiz and found that actually I was quite biased. So, knowledge is power. I know that now. I know that I had this bias, and others, by the way, some I'm not willing to accept, or some I'm not willing to admit, rather, but do accept. And, those are the things that you know about, and you consciously take a step back and think, okay, I know that I think this way. I know that I am biased towards this. Let me make sure I mitigate it by either bringing other people in, or better still, know that, and therefore think about my decision and think, right, am I doing this because of that? And should I actually put that person through another round, for example, with someone different from me? who will actually come up with a different view. And actually, what we've ended up doing is hiring quite a few people that actually haven't passed, you know, my stamp of approval, and vice versa. There've been other senior people who pulled me in saying, can you talk to this person, because I'm not sure, and it's never a no, it's always a I'm not sure because I have these biases, and I want you to sort of, you know, do a filtration and see whether this is it a fair thing or is this a right fit? So net knowledge is power. And, you know, for most of you young people out there, or I don't want to say inexperienced, because you're not, you have your own experiences. So most of you young people out there, there are lots of quizzes available online that are free, that most universities have put up for you to actually check, and just check and see, you know, are you biased? You know, and you know, come in to an organization knowing what that bias is, because that'll really hold you in good stead. It'll really help you in the future.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Sangeeta. I think listening to you, I would think, like you said, knowledge is power. It starts with self-awareness. I think once you have that awareness, and what do you do to gain that awareness, like you said. So I think the multiple surveys that are available, or, you know, the different modes that one can use to enhance that. I would think for some of us who are open to feedback, like it works for me, but of course it has to be from somebody that I regard, because when the feedback comes, and when the feedback, it's painful, because, you know, like people say, truth may not be the most ideal to listen to, and I think that helps and that works. It's really what works for each of us, and I think once you get that awareness, like you rightfully said, is what do you do about it. So like in your case, probably seeking a second opinion, you know, that will probably help. And, you know, if I could just sum that up, I think for the audience today, like you rightfully said, and I think Nuri did mention, mostly probably Gen Zs, you know, one of the idea is you are at the front where you are probably looking at different opportunities. Sometimes you're hearing from people, but is the information really factual? Is the information really, you know, right in terms of for you to be able to make that decision, and hence, you know, seeking different ways of gaining that information. You were saying something, Sangeeta, to that? Did you have anything else to add?
No, all I was going to say is, you know, when you said about getting feedback, I think having a trusted person give you feedback is always much more welcome than someone who just randomly, right, some trainer, right? I always think that when my boss, who I have a good relationship with and I trust, gives me feedback, it really gives me pause for thought, right? I really think about it, and I really think, well, it doesn't matter whether I believe it or not. That's the perception. I need to work on it.
Absolutely.
Very well said. Thanks, Advi.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Nuri, we didn't want to leave you out. So yes, you started off, Nuri, by saying that you are the people strategy and communications lead. What I understand is you support close to 2,500 people across the APAC region, which is a large number. So if you could, you know, share with us, how do you customize your engagement and communication strategy? One is probably, you know, because the support, it's large, but I think most importantly, it's to the current generation, which I think it's a lot more applicable to the audience today.
All right, thanks for that. Yeah, so at Citi, our strongest asset is obviously our people, right? So much so that a key priority and goal for us this year is actually investing in our people, because we want Citi to be a rewarding place for all of our colleagues, to work, and where people feel supported throughout their careers. So that's very important. So given that our focus on people is very critical, our EMT and the organization took the opportunity this year to actually create a more holistic framework and approach to our people strategy across three main pillars, namely talent management, diversity and inclusion, and community. So our strategy really just boils all down to the voice of the employee, right? We listen to our employees on their suggestions and feedback. They share with us what they prefer. So we strategize and design the communications to ensure our people, feel professionally invested in and engage and also feel part of the community, right? Because, in Citi, we're all a family, we're all a community where we can cultivate diversity of thought and commit to inclusion. So to your question, while the main mode of communication is obviously through email, but we try and spice things up and make it more interesting to cater to the current generations. We send like interactive videos, we have chic infographics, we have bulletins, and even down to comic strips to help our get our colleagues engaged and actually understand certain issues, right? And we interact through live polls, voting, surveys, quizzes, and even word clouds using Slido. And on top of that, for you graduates out there, I think you'll be pleased to know that we even have our own social media platform. It's called City Collaborate, where we could all get connected, engage, and follow one another. And also to ensure that we continuously grow and develop at City, we have various development opportunities, such as like professional development series, we have learning series, mentoring programs like what my colleagues has mentioned, monthly Fun Fridays that we actually do and that's ongoing despite the current pandemic. And we have a lot of fun and laughter with one another. So that's that's currently our strategy, Sadhvir.
Yes, thank you so much, Nuri. And we had this thing on Friday. I don't know if all of us had attended, just for the benefit of the audience. So it's the community. We are sort of like looking at funds to be able to. So what Raymond had said, a lot of work happens with the community, the general community out there. So in conjunction with the Global Community Day for City, we actually had young children of our fellow colleagues who actually had they performed live, mostly live for the audience. So to Nuri's point, I think a lot of those activities are very at the forefront with what we do, which hopefully helps engage more people. And in the current times with the pandemic still ongoing in Malaysia, it becomes tougher because most of us are still not face to face. So I think the creativity really matters. So thank you so much, Nuri. Team, we've spoken a lot about the whole diversity piece, which we started off, and a bit of generations. And Nuri, thank you for giving us insight about the fun activities that we are embarking on. Just on a serious note, and if I may read this out to you, just looking at global stats, 23% women are paid less than men. It would take 267 years to breach the gap, which are very frightening numbers, I may say. So, Sangeeta, if I may address this to you, as you had provided in your introduction earlier, you are the Diversity of Women Network Chair for City Malaysia. So this is a question in twofold. So one is, what are your views about these stats? And at the same time, what can be done, in your opinion, to close the gap?
Okay, thanks, Satveer. So, I mean, my view is shocking, right? I mean, it's shocking that in this day and age, we have these kind of, issues that why we even still talking about it is my basic question, right? And the reason we are is because the data, unfortunately, tells you that, there is this massive gap. Now, my view is that the only way you're actually genuinely going to address this gap that we have between the genders and the pay is if you A, talk about it, B, be honest about it, and C, give people accountability for it, right? As I mean, the audience won't know this, but anyone who's worked in City for even 1 month will know that we are very, very accountable people, right? All of us, you give us a target and we will make damn sure we meet it, right? It's very, very, everything of ours is around, okay, how do we measure it? And if you can measure it, we will get to it. We will figure out a way, we will be innovative, we'll figure out a way to get to it, right? So one of the first things that City did when we actually had a new head of HR globally about maybe 5-6 years ago, right? So about 5-6 years ago, Sarah Vector. And she basically made a really bold decision to publish City's data. So she published two different things. She published the adjusted data, which is basically male and female across a role that you do, what is the difference? And in that, it turned out that the difference wasn't that much, because if you're a bank teller and you're male, if you're a bank teller, you're female, the difference in your pay is not that much. Then she also took one step further, and she published the raw data, which is basically every single male in Citigroup, every single female in Citigroup, what is the delta? Now, obviously the delta was higher, but the reason the delta was higher was because we tend to have more senior men, Right? Simple as that. At the senior level, you have more men. So if you add up all of their salaries, and it doesn't matter how many junior people, female salaries you add, the median, sort of the middle point, is always going to be skewed towards the male. So what's the answer to that? The answer is that we need to have equal representation at the high level, at the senior level, right? We need to have more managing directors. We have to have more directors, more senior vice presidents. So how do we do that? The easiest way to do it is you need to make sure at the lowest level when you're hiring, you have at least 50%, right? Because if you start off at a point where you only have, I don't know, 30% females, and you know there's more droppage at that level as you go more and more senior, if you don't start with a decent number, you're never going to end up with a decent number at the top. You're going to have no chance. So we at the mid-level, and actually not just at the junior level, but at the mid-level as well. But for you audience, obviously the junior level is more relevant. We always try and hire at least 50-50, right? We want to make sure we consciously do that. Now, there's a lot of stuff around, oh, you should hire the best person. Is it the best person, etc. To that, I say unconscious bias. Right? That's where my answer kind of comes to. That I say, why do you assume that the person that you're hiring is not the best person? Is there some kind of unconscious bias? And that's why I think, give targets, make people accountable, publish them in the marketplace freely. It's for anyone to see. Well, we're not hiding it. You don't have to go through a lot of stuff to get it. You can then say to senior managers, you can say to the Raymonds, the Christians, the Nuris, the me, the Satvirs, show us your numbers and put your money where your mouth is. Now, the other thing that we also do, I think, is worth mentioning as well, which again is to do with unconscious bias, is we always have a diverse slate. So we always make sure that when we are hiring people, and this is where I kind of play a part a lot of the time, when we're hiring people, we always make sure we hire the people who are interviewing are male and female, not just the male, not just the female, right? A combination of them. You will always have an interview with a female senior leader and a male senior leader to make sure that we are actually getting rid of this unconscious bias that we have. Now, I can talk about a slightly personal story for me around how this kind of diversity and this diverse slate has worked for me. So when I was in London, do I have the time, Satbir? Yeah, for a quick anecdote?
Yes.
Okay, so I was in London in 2015, and I was asked actually by a senior manager to apply for a role. I was way underqualified for that role, right? I was like nowhere near. But a lot of the time, senior managers ask you to apply for the role, not so that they think you're going to get it, but because they want you to be seen, right? They want you to be seen, and they want people to know who you are at a more senior level. So I applied for this job, actually came runners up. I knew I was never going to get it, but I kind of almost had nothing to lose. So I was quite bold about everything I said. Didn't get that job. However, 4 months later, I got another offer. I got tapped and said, look, apply for this job. I think it's the perfect job for you. And then I actually got the job in Singapore, and I moved from London to Singapore. Now, what that means to me is that, in a diverse slate, when I mean diverse slate, I mean, when people are applying for a senior role, they always make sure there should be females and males applying for that role, not just anyone who could, it has to be a mixture of people applying, so everyone is considered. The diverse slate might not, they still hire the best person for that role, but it gave me an opportunity to be seen at a level that I wouldn't have been seen before, and it gave me a different opportunity. So, I think not getting, a setback, it wasn't a setback because I knew I wasn't going to get it, but, a so-called setback is actually a good thing in the long run. So being on a diverse slate, people will be like, oh, why do I always have to interview for roles just because they want to have a diverse slate? It's not for that role, it's for the next one, the one after that, the one after that. So that's how we kind of like think, and this is how we're organized in Citi to make sure that we actually are really thinking about what our diversity numbers are and the pay gap and the gender gap that we have.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Sangeeta, for that. I think I would then draw back to the previous conversation we were having around that awareness. So once you know it, it's really then putting it to action, which is apt to our current, today's topic. It's about, it's about action and what do you do about it. I think since we're speaking about stats, one of the other studies that was conducted or that have been around is the fact that generally with females, what happens is because we probably are a gender which maybe we are more hesitant. So a lot of times where there's an opportunity, you literally have multiple things that run in your mind. So you always have that doubt about, oh, I've only got 50% for that role or that opportunity, whereas a male person would perhaps only have 30% and yet will be all that enthusiastic to then look at that opportunity. So I think to your point, Sangeeta, I think it's really about being conscious about it and doing things that sort of like sort of like complement or help in mitigating all of those factors like you mentioned. So for example, it's when you have got a female person has an interview panel, then what happens is it really goes back to the unconscious bias, because you really, and we're not saying that just because a male colleague interviews that result wouldn't be there, but it's really about looking at multiple factors. So one is the targets, number two, looking at some of the other factors that will help address some of these issues that we have. And I'm proud to say, I think with City Malaysia, we obviously don't see that even if our senior management team, and I think to Sangeeta, to your point, that's really because of all these decisions that have been made in the past, and we consciously make that today. We had a question, and I think that's very in relations to what Sangeeta you had mentioned. So the question was around how City promotes D&I in the hiring process and also workplace culture in general. So I think the D&I in the hiring process, Sangeeta, you had briefly mentioned that. Perhaps if you want to just expand that a little to workplace culture in general, like
Sure. And I think to your point, Satvir, around most female candidates will not apply for a job if they think that they haven't got at least 60 to 70% of what's on the job rec, right? I'm not saying that all men will, because some men do and some men don't, but females in general as a rule would tend not to apply for a job unless they're pretty sure. Now, how does the culture help in this case? An actual live example is me, right? The culture helps in that you have people actively tapping you and saying, Nuri, apply for this role. You're probably not going to get it, but apply for this role. Satvir, have you considered this? So to me, that's the culture. And it's not just, occasionally one or two people here or there. This is like a rigor that we have in City around when any of my team is interviewing, hiring for a role, I'll always say to them, right, how many male, how many female, let me be part of some of the interview panels. Let me see what kind of questions they're asking. Let me see, what the job rec looks like. A lot of the time, the writing of the job rec is quite skewed. It just doesn't sound like something that any females will want to apply for. Another thing that we do, and this, HR would talk about it more, is, when we put a role out there in LinkedIn or somewhere, and we look at the number of people who applied, if we find that only 90% are men who have applied, only 10% are women, we look at the job spec again, we pull it back and we say, hey, what is it about this job spec that no females want to apply for it, right? Let's look at it again, because we're not biased towards only wanting men. It's not hard labor, right? There's nothing in the bank that we do that is hard labor that would have a requirement to have someone who's got strong muscles. Not that women don't have strong muscles, but so this is the sort of active cultural thing that we have around us, that we're always constantly thinking about, are we being fair? Are we being, coherent with our strategy? Are we actually, and the accountability for the senior leaders on this panel, the accountability of having to, say at the end of the year or during any point in time, hey, what is your percentage of male versus female? And and if it's really low, what are you doing about it? That to me is kind of the thing we live and breathe every day, the cultural part of D&I, diversity and inclusion in this firm. And that's the only thing that's going to actually make the difference in the long run, right? If each and every person in the firm doesn't feel it and believe it and feel accountable for it, nothing's going to change.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, you mentioned strong muscles, and I was just going to make a reference to, was it WWE yesterday where you had the women fight? So if no, if you want to look at strong muscles, you should have been watching that, and McGregor lost.
Or
Anyway,
actually even football players, right? I mean, you
yeah,
look at the female football players,
yeah.
they have such much harder hits than the men ones before they actually topple down, right? Versus like the smallest kick and they're like, you know. But anyway, let's not get into football again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Sangeeta. Wow, I think we've spoken a lot about diversity and the whole female quotient, etc. I think one of the other aspects when we talk about D&I, it's also the multi generations that are at the workplace. And Raymond, you being the chair of the diversity network for City Malaysia, and we all know today we've got all 4 generations at work. So what do you feel, or are there examples that you're able to share that allows people to coexist in a beneficial way?
Sure. I think drawing on what Sangeeta was talking about, when it comes to D&I, you have to be fairly deliberate in how you want to see the thing play out. So if you let nature take its course and just allow things to happen naturally, the tendency is that people of the same generations will group together, people of the same gender will group together, because that's how humans would feel naturally. So for City, we have to ensure that we introduce a deliberateness in terms of the process. And one example I can give, which is something that is tangible, is we set up a lot of task forces, right? We've always got projects going on, here and there. We've always got a lot of stuff to do, and sometimes setting up a task force is always a very good way to, get the job done, make sure that the tasks are done in a very structured manner, and so on and so forth. And the way that we can create this coexisting thing which you were thinking about is that, you set the criteria for the participation in the task force, right? So you say, okay, we have like 4 people or 5 people, and you can set criteria. Okay, 1 person should be from a Gen Z, 1 should be a Gen Y, X, and so on and so forth. You need to have at least 2 female and 2 male in the task force. So by doing that, you allow people to coexist, but in a deliberate way. Because if you let the teams kind of, and I've seen this over the many years in City, where if you let the teams kind of just hang out with each other, there are some natural tendencies that people who have the same interests will just kind of become good friends, and then they become like cliques in certain businesses, right? I mean, every business obviously has cliques. So we need to break this apart, especially when we're talking about something that needs to be done for the organization. Because without that different generation in the task force, you don't get that myriad of ideas, you don't get that creative spark that comes out as they kind of talk about what they should do and the way to go about it. And we also need to ensure that, as we go along, getting ideas for growing the business or getting a certain task done, the feedback that we get cannot be just to a certain group of people to say, oh, I only want the SVPs to give me feedback, or I only want the directors to give me feedback. Because again, it goes back to that group thing problem, right? So if you're talking to people who have been with the bank 20 years, they've gone through the same kind of businesses, they've gone through the same type of training, then what would you expect from feedback, right? It would be the same. So you need to kind of break that again and make sure that from a process perspective, feedback is obtained from people across generations and without bias. It's not to say that you've only got 2 years working experience and therefore, I discount your feedback 50%. And that's not fair. I think to the audience that's watching, when you are coming into the workplace, I think City allows young people to express themselves, allows young people to, be themselves. I think this is one of the very important things. City will allow you to be yourself at work and not to have the fear where you don't speak up because there are more experienced people, or this whole kind of thinking where speak only when you are spoken to. So we have to get rid of all these bias. Young people coming in, they provide very good feedback. They provide a very vast way of looking at things that we've been doing for a long time. And to further drive that point home, when you have projects, the tendency for people is to say, okay, the person leading the project has to be the most experienced staff because then you get the results. But what happens when you flip it the other way, like this reverse mentoring thing that we were discussing earlier, right? You flip it around and you let the younger staff actually lead the project rather than the other way around. And to be frank, some of the more experienced staff may actually heave a sigh of relief and say, oh, finally, right? I don't always have to lead the project, because sometimes it's a burden, right? And working with someone younger, more energetic, would actually give me more insight as to how I can contribute more as a participant rather than always being a leader. So these are a couple of things, Xavier, I think that where we allow people to coexist, but again, going back to the fact that we have to be deliberate in some of these processes and the way that we create these environments for them to coexist. So that would be my take on that. Hope that helps.
No, thank you so much, Raymond. I think I'll sum it up with sometimes it's also conditioning, because you are conditioned in that manner and you've been probably doing it for a while. And like you rightfully said, something having a fresh mind on something, they bring in a super fresh perspective, which could be really apt and applicable in the current situation. We've got some questions coming from the audience.
Sure.
I think everybody's very intrigued and interested in the conversation today. So maybe Kristen, I'll go to you, and then Nuri, I've got a question specific for you, and Raymond, somebody asked a question addressed to you. So Kristen, workforce diversity has been linked with many benefits, such as boosting creativity. So to Raymond's point, I think this is very relatable because of the projects that we had mentioned. And you being an aeronautical engineer and now a banker, so who would have thought of, from designing planes to, where you are today? Tell us, how true is this for you?
Thanks for the question, Xavier. Well, aerospace engineering by training, what it has done for me is it's provided me the opportunity to think in a meticulous process thinking point of way, right? And I think Sangeeta can probably relate to this. Engineers tend to break things up to really understand the intricate cogs and its levers and what really makes things tick, right? So I think what's important is the most important ingredient is acceptance at the workplace, no matter what your background of education has been, right? I think that's the key part of what Citi does. Apart from being competent, it's important that the person who's applying for the job has the initiative to be aware, and more importantly, have heart, have the right attitude and the right approach. I think perseverance and resilience and empathy are three key competencies that we really look out from. I mean, apart from the fact that you should obviously be competent in the job, right? In terms of what technical skills you can bring to the table. But yes, I do believe, I would like to say that I've given back all my engineering to my professors back at school. I did graduate from University of Sheffield. Lovely place, by the way. But yeah, I think it does bring a little bit of difference to what I do at the workplace. And obviously, I think that the bank, when they hired me 12 years ago, they did take a gamble, right? I still remember my interview session. Back then, I remember he said, look, Christian, I don't think you have what it takes to do the job, quite honestly speaking. I was like, okay, one way to scare me and see if I really have it, right? But guess what? The next day they gave me the letter and say, look, you should try. And I got in. And you know what? It's been a terrific journey for me, and I really enjoy every single moment I've had so far. So I think one important thing about this is when I said Citi took a gamble on me, right? It's important that if you want to drive diversity and inclusion, you got to start seeing people for who they are, people for people, and how they perform at work, and not with labels. The moment we start with labels, and labels is, start saying, oh, there's ethnicity, there's gender, there's age, there's background and education and whatnot. That's where diversity, will fall apart. It's important that we start looking at them differently, right? Individuals as individuals, and that's where it starts enabling progress. And very importantly, it has to get this throughout the entire organization. It has to be from top down, right? The right culture for organization really comes from within and needs to be promoted and lived right from the top of the leaders. And as with any business strategy, leaders have to map out the road to success. And I think that's what Citi has done pretty well for us. They have to set specific measurable goals. Each of us have KPIs. Those KPIs are around all these accountabilities, whether it's related to diversity and inclusion, and all the leadership standards that we have at Citi. And like I said before, the 10 affinity groups that we spoke about, each are led by a senior leader at a global level, and that gets translated through across to all the level. Even down here, that's why you have Sangeeta leading the Citi Women's Network, and we've got Raymond leading the Generations Network in Malaysia. I mean, that's all the way down here, right? And campaigning it with meaningful activities, that's how we're going to challenge this. So yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Christian, for that. I think it's really aligned to one of the questions that we had from the audience, which is, does someone with no background in banking or finance have opportunity with Citi? And I think you had summed that up pretty well. And I think for the audience to also note, we have got 2 engineers on the call, and we have got 1 legal legal graduate on the call, and we are all where we are today in the banking industry or in a financial institution, doing very well for yourselves, ourselves. So I think the opportunities are ample. To Christian's point, yes, there could be a point where it probably is a gamble at the beginning, but I think the gamble is just once. The whole journey, it's really upon the individual. Anything further to add on that, Christian, on that question?
Yeah, I think you pretty much captured the essence of my answer over there, right? What I really meant was, when we said we take a gamble, it's really just to see beyond your educational degree, right? And that's really what I call a passport. It doesn't matter whether you come from a legal background, accounting background, or even a medical background, and you want to come into banking. That's not a problem, right? As long as you have heart, and that's my point, you have heart, and you have the right positivity, perseverance, and resilience, you'll be able to survive anything through this, right? And I can honestly say, if you ask me, did I make the right decision between engineering and banking? Oh, definitely. I mean, the people I work with, the sheer talent, the culture at Citi, it's amazing, right? I love this place, right?
Absolutely. We can all feel the love, Christian. It's mutual. All right. Maybe Nuri, if I could just address this to you. The question is, would you describe your ideal, how would you describe your ideal talent for Citi? Are there any different qualities that Citi is looking for? So maybe we start with what's an ideal talent for Citi in your view?
I think like what Christian just mentioned earlier about, like taking a gamble. I think what he mentioned about a candidate having passion for what he or she does. It doesn't matter what background, what degree you have, but as soon as you come in, obviously you've applied for the role, right? And obviously you've looked at the JD, and you may not know certain things, but that's where you learn. And Citi is a big believer in learning things, like coming into the role, taking the job as it is, learning through the job. I think that itself is what is basically the right attitude once you get into the workforce. And once you learn the role, right, you slowly get into the gist of it. And then I think building relationship with your colleagues, your managers especially, is very important. Having that right attitude and trust, I think will lead you very far in Citi. So I think we all come from various backgrounds, like what we all mentioned, like all of us here. Having that I would say positivity will bring you very far.
Thank you. Thank you. So, if I may sum that up, I think it all starts with me, with us. And I think a very powerful word you had used is the attitude, which is, it's really upon one to make and design their career. Great. Raymond, this is specific to you, actually. You had somebody in the audience who wants your view. So the question, it's a pretty long one, so I'm going to read it, and then we probably dissect it as we go along, right? For a graduate to join a company, sometimes they tend to have difficulty to interact around senior colleagues. Based on your experience, are there any tips that can help a fresh graduate to feel more comfortable in the current environment? It's a very, very good question. Over to you, Raymond.
Sure. And just to add, I'm also I'm not a finance grad, right? I'm a quantity surveyor by training, so never did any finance. So I'm more in construction type of thing. So it just shows anyone can get into banking, and with the right attitude, you can get to kind of where you are. But just to address that question, I think it's a very good one, because I do see that young people, when they come into a very established organization, because we're not like a startup, right? Where everyone's like, young and it's a new company. In an old organization like Citi, there are certain entrenched behaviors and certain entrenched cultures which are, not easy to kind of get rid of. And I do see that sometimes young people coming in do struggle a bit because they're not sure how to navigate this very large organization. They're not sure whether they're going to step on someone's toes by saying something wrong. They're not sure that, they should send out emails in this manner, who's copied on the email. So it is, to be fair, a fairly complex web to navigate. But I would say that a lot of the onus is really on the manager and the management and the leadership of the business. Because when we bring someone in that's young and willing to learn and with a good attitude, it is our job to make sure that we create the pathway, right? We create the pathway in terms of mentoring the person. We create the pathway in terms of ensuring, like what I said earlier, being deliberate in involving them in projects, in task force, so that they learn to become a bit more comfortable in their own skin in terms of expressing their views and not just nodding their head to everything that a senior person says. And I think the culture in Citi is such that we address everyone by first name. I mean, even if Jane Fraser comes to Malaysia, we're not going to call her ma'am or Miss Fraser, right? I mean, that sounds weird for Citi culture, right? I mean, all of us on this call, I'm sure our staff address us by first name. You don't call her Sangeeta, like, hi Miss Bishop or something. How are you doing? It sounds so weird. So I think the culture itself in Citi is quite informal, and that helps to break down barriers when you're on a first name basis with the bosses. I know some other institutions, some other banks, they're very formal. You have to address a person by their family name with a Mr. or Miss in front. If not, people will feel that you're rude or not keeping in line with what the company culture is. So I would say that for Citi, because we are quite an informal organization from that perspective, naturally we do of course require high performance and achievement of targets, but the environment itself allows young people to come in and feel that they can really be a part of the success and not that they'll just be playing a minor role in whatever happens. So I would say that a lot of it is obviously on how we deliberately create the pathway. And the other piece is, when we hire someone coming in that's young, they also have to kind of sense that we're giving them a pathway and, take advantage of it. EQ is very critical, I think, how they deal with people. So they have to sense that people are trying to help them and just capitalize on what we're trying to. So I would answer it that way, Sylvia.
Yeah, thank you so much.
If I may
Sure,
add
sure.
something to that,
Sure.
I think what I've found is, despite moving from country to country, settling into Citi in any location in the world, from South Africa to Beijing to Shanghai to Moscow, what's been similar is the Citi culture that we have across all these countries is always the same. So whenever I move to a new country, my challenge is never, oh, am I going to be okay in the office? Is it going to be weird? I'm going to have to make new friends. That's never an issue, right? When I moved from Singapore to Malaysia, that wasn't my first concern. Yeah, the external environment around me is always different, but when I walk into work every day and and I say hello to the first person, or I get set up at work on my infrastructure, etc., it's always the same experience. So I think, and also the culture is always the same. It's something about, I don't know how we manage it, but we always have a very, very similar culture across the globe, irrespective of what the external environment looks like.
Sangeeta, just give me 1 second. I want to add to what Raymond mentioned. Now I have a real life experience that has happened before. So I think 3 months into the job, this was back in 2009, 2010-ish, right? So the person who hired me was then my boss, right? And he said, look, I want you to go and reach out to a couple of seniors, right? And the intent is really for them to walk you through and understand the business and what they do in certain departments and their roles. So here I am, I got a list of names, right? So I start off with my email, and I go, and this person's name was Chu KY, right? I addressed this person with a salutation and a prefix. I said, dear Mr. Chu, my name is Christian. I would like to, my boss told me I should reach out to you and get to know you better. Guess what? This person was a lady, right? So that's where she actually replied me, say, first of all, I'm not Mr. Chu. You can address me by my first name. And yes, I will gladly take you on and walk you through whatever you need. So I think that's the kind of culture that Raymond was alluding to, right? We don't have a hierarchy here in the city, and that's very important. And the fact that I was able to reach out to a senior, and this person was a senior vice president back then. I'm only just an entry person, right, as an MA. I think over time, we caught up, we connected, and we became pretty good friends as well. So I think that's important to note, that we have that kind of culture and people are willing to take you under the wing as long as you're willing to reach out. Again, the message is have the right attitude, and that will take you very far. And no new salutations here, right? It's not going to work.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Christian, I think the one takeaway for everybody in the audience today is when you meet us in City and you meet us at the corridor, we are Nuri, Sadvir, Christian, Sangeeta, Raymond for you, not Mr. Chia or Mr. Lim or Miss Lim. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I know we are doing okay with time. We're slightly off, but just one question, which I think it's apt and probably important for us to address and answer. So this question is from a person asking, how can young people make their opinions heard and be trusted in situations where they are being looked down upon for being young? I know this is probably a hypothetical question for us in City because we don't have real life examples to share, unfortunately. But one of you would want to just address that to just see how can one address or help, manage that in their situation.
Maybe I can just give it a
Nuri, yes.
go. Yeah, so I think first of all, like what we all mentioned, culture in City is very open. We're very open to feedback. So it actually doesn't matter if you're being young. No one would actually look down on you, first and foremost. And second of all, when you come into City, you won't be left completely alone, right? Even in the virtual environment, right? You'll be given a City buddy, right? So your buddy will walk you through what are the do's and don'ts, how you can actually ask questions. And then at the end of the day, once you're assimilated to City, you'll be given all sorts of obviously resources and tools, whatever it is, like who you can reach out to. And what this means is, first, you don't have to be afraid, right? When you come join us in City, we're one big happy family. Everyone will come and try and look out for you, look after you as well. And if you've got any questions, we also have the VOE champion. We call it the Voice of Employee champion. He or she can address any needs, right? In terms of obviously, whatever you're feeling, whatever, what are your fears currently, right? What you do you not understand, right? And obviously your buddy is there to kind of bring you through the A to Z's of City. So I think you don't have to be afraid. If you have the chance to join City, we will gladly welcome you on board, and we will really take good care of you.
Can I just add to that, Savia? Right. So
Yes, Raymond.
I also recognize that City is a fairly unique organization, and you could be asking a question, generally, that if you join an organization that doesn't have the same culture as City, then you've probably heard about it from your friends and your concern. So I would just say this: I think if you are in an environment where you're trying to push forward an idea with the senior people, I think it's important to understand the dynamics of the organization, because I can't speak for every organization, and not all organizations are the same. So I don't think that's a straight answer, but I would say have your facts on hand. Make sure that you're able to present the ideas in a logical manner, and you're able to stand up to questioning, right? And I think give the idea in a pleasant manner. Don't be arrogant. Don't appear that I know more than you. That should work generally in most organizations, unless there's a particular group that's trying to be deliberately difficult with young people. Then of course that's something that you may need to kind of have a side chat with your mentor or manager. And it happens, right? I think we all acknowledge that there are organizations where it's tough when you're young. But hang in there. Just make sure you've got the facts. Be able to argue back, rationalize back in terms of what you're trying to say. So that would be my advice to you.
And
Yes,
also, if you don't know the answer, and I've been in that situation where I had a brilliant idea and then I got questioned and I didn't know the answer, the best thing to always say is, I don't know, I did not think about that. Let me think about it and get back to you, right? don't try and fluff your way through it. That's like the worst thing you can do, just for personal integrity point of view.
Just to
you.
also add on
Yes,
to what
Christian.
Raymond has mentioned, if you don't mind, Savir, I think Raymond touched an excellent point, right? I mean, the person who's coming up with the questions or coming up with a point to make, you got to come up with some level of credibility behind what you're saying. But there's also there's two sides of the coin, right? It's about the people who are already experienced and in the organization who's going to be willing to open up and listen to that. I mean, we have a couple of testimonies. One, I think the fact that we have the reverse mentoring is one that Raymond covered in detail. Number two is that, you know, the affinity bias, unconscious bias that Sangeet talked about earlier. It's a training that's rolled out across the entire organization, right? That Citi is serious about making everyone understand and be aware that you have those unconscious biasness. And that should open up that opportunity for us to listen to people of all ages, of all generations, of all kinds of different diversity. And that's the testimony. Last but not least, the four of us here on the call, right? Including yourself, Savia, the five of us, right? Nuri, 8 years, Sangeeta, 22, Raymond, 14, I, 12, right? We all started somewhere, right? We all had, you know, before we all came to this point, we all once, I would like to think that we're all young, well, once young, right? And we all had to ask those questions as well. And the fact that we're here today is a testimony that you have that opportunity as well.
I'm going to correct you there, Christian. Not once young, always young.
Sorry, absolutely. Young at heart.
Yes. Always perpetual. All right. No, I think that was very nice in terms of how you had sort of like sum it up. And I think we are sort of like good with timing. Just any parting thoughts that any one of you have that you would probably like to share for the team. I know we've spoken a lot, and I think we've shared quite a bit today. Anything that you would, so I think what could happen if I could just sum up the discussion or the conversation that we had today. I think we spoke a lot about how wide the coverage of diversity and the whole inclusion piece is. We went into the multi-generations, conversation that we had and how one can coexist and still make the best out of it. It was nice that we with the questions that came, we ended with, at the end of the day, it begins with me. It begins with us. And I think that's when we brought the whole having the right attitude in place. And some of you were able to share those examples. And I like what Raymond had said about ensuring that you come prepared. So Christian had also mentioned that in terms of having those facts in hand, having that perspective that you come when you put it out there to whoever that you're speaking with. So thank you so much, team, for such engaging enlightening conversation. I would say, I think some of the information was very, very insightful. What I would like to leave you and the audience with, it's a final thought. Diversity is not about how we differ. Diversity is about embracing one another's uniqueness. And I think we I don't know if that sums it up nicely, but I think that was really the gist of the conversation or the chat we had today. So with that, thank you very much. Goodbye and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Satvir, Christian, Sangeeta, Raymond, and Nuri for the insight into life at the organization and for sharing your own experiences on diversity and inclusion and how that has shaped your views today. Not sure if all the panelists have seen the chat box, but our audience very much appreciates the references to the Euros and BTS that was made earlier today. Definitely one of the more engaging webinars we've had throughout the fair. It's very refreshing to know that Citi is an organization that really cares about their people, appreciates their differences, and gives everyone an equal opportunity to climb up the corporate ladder. So if you'd like to be a part of an organization that champions diversity, will value the different worldview you bring, provides their people with a space to speak up along with many other perks, you can discover the different opportunities available at Citibank by visiting their virtual booth. Once again, thank you to our panel. We wish you all the best. A big thanks to our viewers as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. Do make the most of today as it's the last day of the fair. You can vote for Citibank as Malaysia's most preferred employer by visiting their virtual booth here at Grado and Aspire. So that's all we have today from